People on the left often have problems framing issues, and nowhere is this problem more prevalent than with gun control. People on the left often like framing gun control as a safety concern, when quite frankly, safety, while that is a major problem related to it, and to be entirely honest, for compassionate people, safety should be what matters. But the fact of the matter is, the United States has never been a country where appealing to safety on a more general issue as opposed to safety from a specific extremist group, but has been a viable way to argue for something. Safety tends to not be in this country. General welfare of the people tends to not be. Instead, in this country, what tends to be the best way to frame issues so that you get there's a general understanding of it, at least general understanding among politically savvy people, tends to be economics framing. And I think gun control is actually best understood through the economics framing, particularly for people who aren't overly concerned about safety or who consider incorrect interpretation of the Second Amendment in Heller to be how they frame gun control. The purpose of gun control is not to get rid of guns, and the purpose of gun control is not to make it so that criminals won't have guns because they'll follow the law. No one actually thinks that. They don't. Same way people don't think that criminals won't kill people because they follow the law. Instead, the purpose of gun control is as the purpose of all laws of which there's a criminal sanction as a penalty. The purpose of gun control is to create disincentives. In gun control, the particular disincentives are economic in nature. Look at the various gun control proposals, and one that I personally have that unfortunately no one ever makes. Background checks. What's the purpose of universal background checks? The purpose of universal background checks is to punish gun sellers. How do you punish How does it punish gun sellers? It makes so that they could get in trouble if they sell a gun without doing a proper background check. Makes so that they can get in trouble if they sell a gun to someone who fails a background check. How do they get in trouble? They lose their license. That takes away their ability to sell guns legally. They could pay a fine. That's a direct economic disincentive. They could go to jail, causing them to, in addition to losing certain liberties, lose money. Once again, a direct economic disincentive. And thus, if they want to sell guns illegally, which people who want to sell guns illegally, I presume, still will, assuming the disincentive isn't strong enough to make them say, never mind completely, if they still want to sell guns, then guess what they'll do? In order to cover their risk, they'll increase their prices of the guns they sell illegally. The cost will go up. Hence, criminals will be less likely to get guns, not because they're going to follow the law, but because they can't afford them, or at least they're less likely to afford them. Thus, there are fewer guns in the hands of criminals. This is not, and this of course also goes with the other popular gun control measure and concept of a gun buyback program. The purpose of a gun buyback program is to reduce the number of guns that are currently available. Hence, there are fewer guns. The guns that there are cost more. There's the third thing that's often talked about, which is gun registration. Which, if you have an unregistered which it's risky to have an unregistered firearm, there's that disincentive. Now, related to gun registration is my proposal that, unfortunately, I know no state has, and I'm not sure anyone's ever even formally proposed legislation that would put this into effect, and that is to create to make it so that if a gun owner doesn't report their gun stolen within 48 hours of discovering that their gun is stolen, then any crime that's committed with their gun, they're not liable for that crime in any way, but they're liable for a separate, preferably federal crime federal crime of allowing their weapon to be used for illegal purposes, and with a gradual and the way I would handle this, such a law would be a gradual start in terms of the penalties that would increase as increased convictions. For the first conviction, 6 months in jail, 1 year, and for 1 year you're not allowed to possess guns. That's not a that wouldn't be a felony. It's only 6 months, which could potentially be shortened. Shortened in the individual case, could be suspended, but still 6 months, and for 18 months, no guns. Second offense, 12-month sentence. You're not allowed to have guns for 4 years. I would say 11 months. Actually, let's make this an 11-month sentence, so it's still not a felony. It's not a felony, but no guns for 3 years. Third offense, 36-month sentence, lifetime, no guns, which would be standard because felons aren't allowed to own firearms, and 36 months means on the third time, congratulations, you just went up to a felony. Good job! This would disincentivize people from selling guns illegally because of the risk of getting caught. And in addition, it would cause people to be more responsible with the guns that they have. If you're concerned about going to jail for your gun being stolen, then if your house or your apartment is broken into, you're gonna check: are my guns still here? Are my guns still safe? And if they're not, you call your local gun registration office. That is one other change that I mentioned when it comes to gun registration, I think is essential, which is universal gun registration, similar to how we have universal car registration. And cars aren't designed to kill people, guns are. Thus, you call your local gun registration office and you say, "Hi, my gun, blah blah blah, serial number of blah 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 blah, was recently stolen." There, it was recently stolen. You report it. You report it over the phone. You fill out an electronic form. Submit the electronic form. You're no longer liable. That's something that reporting weapons stolen is something that I would assume that all people who are actually responsible gun owners already do. Thus, as with all the other penalties, this doesn't harm responsible gun owners. It harms irresponsible gun owners who are themselves detriments to responsible gun owners and to the safety of Americans. But once again, it's not about safety. It's about the economic disincentive. It's about the fact that people who would sell guns illegally are going to sell them for a lot more money to cover their risk, because that's what you do. To the extent that you can get away with it, in the legal market, that'd be independent regulations that say independent regulations to prevent you from doing it. You put the brunt of your increased overhead due to, in this case, risks, onto your consumer. The consumer being those who would buy guns illegally. And thus, gun control is an issue best understood and best framed, not through safety, but through economics. Thank you.